Think of the bright side. She gave birth to your grandchild. Say hi to your grandpa.
We are talking Aquanoids from 2003, directed by Reinhard Peschke. Peschke primarily works as a cinematographer and a camera operator, but here he is as director. And it's a fairly kind of no-name cast here. The lead actress here, Laura Nativo, heads it up as this kind of character, Vanessa, I believe her name is. And this is effectively kind of another version of Humanoids from the Deep, a very low budget version of Humanoids from the Deep, which was already kind of low budget, let's be honest. What's the story? Well, it takes place off the coast of California somewhere, and in the 80s we learned that there is this number of attacks on humans by what the locals affectionately know as Aquanoids. But now, in 16 or so years later, in present day, these attacks start to happen again, except the local mayor and land developer want to cover this up because they want, the tourism to flourish, to kind of put the prices up, etc., and get money. But we have our main kind of character, Laura Nativo's character, and a couple of others are trying to prove the existence of this Aquanoid and try and kill it ultimately with a survivor of the 80s encounter. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, this is a very low budget movie. It's actually somewhat reminiscent of a trauma movie. It really feels like it should be a trauma movie. It isn't, but it just kind of feels like it, if you know what I mean. So be prepared for ultimate schlock, silliness, and low budgetness. But what does work in this movie's favour? If you consider the budget, I will say there's some okay practical VFX. This movie does have a few gore shots, and I think it was done pretty well. Obviously, this is a 2003 movie, so we did have kind of the early kind of CGI here, but they stay away from it. They actually do use practical effects, and a couple of them are relatively effective, I have to say. I thought they look pretty good considering the budget. The actual Aquanoid itself, and yes, there is only one, it kind of looks okay. It doesn't really look like it would be an aquatic creature. It looks more like a kind of undead demon, if you ask me. But nonetheless, I think the actual makeup effects and the costume, I think it's not too bad. It's as I say, it doesn't really look like it would live underwater necessarily, but the actual VFX look fairly okay. There we go. The movie has a somewhat meta quality to it. They actually name drop a couple of aquatic horror movies, and we're not talking the big ones. They name drop Deep Star 6, Leviathan, to name a couple here. So it is a little bit of a kind of inside baseball, I suppose, to film production. They mentioned Roger Corman a couple of times. So yes, this movie feels like it's being made somewhat lovingly, I guess you would say. The movie, thankfully, isn't too long. It's relatively, a punchy film in some ways, and it's occasionally, sometimes unintentionally, kind of funny. I quite like Laura Nativo's character. She's not the best actress in this. I mean, I don't know what she did later on, but in this, she's not the best actress, but I did find her somewhat very excitable character, quite charming at times. But what doesn't work, I mean, this movie is very schlocky, let me just say. Now, considering the director primarily has worked as a cinematographer and cameraman, you would have thought this would have been relatively well shot. But it isn't. This movie actually is quite shoddily directed, sadly, and it just feels like it's somewhat slapped together. There's a variety of choices. For example, there's a couple of sequences where we're on land, but we're using like a fisheye lens and things. There's horrible kind of jump cuts. There's use of kind of like video effects and things to kind of like, so when we see the creatures like POV, and it just looks horrible. A lot of the time the camera's way too close to people, which it gives it that kind of trauma feel. That's partly why I say the movie feels like a trauma movie, because of these sort of filming techniques that gives it this kind of somewhat erratic kind of feel, but at the same time it just seems a little bit, you know, slapped together, to be honest with you. As I've kind of alluded to, the acting isn't the best. I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to be for these type of movies, to be honest. This is not trying to be necessarily a dramatic piece of entertainment, let me just tell you, but you know, I have to kind of say. I think the movie's main critique maybe is it's more focused on the corrupt sort of government officials trying to cover things up rather than the actual Aquanoid themselves. I would argue that there's more screen time spent with the mayor and this land developer trying to silence witnesses, and these our protagonists trying to either get away or fight back and stuff, than there is of the actual kind of creature itself, or dealing with the kind of the creature. So the movie becomes more about that than the actual sort of sea creature, which I think is possibly the biggest critique you might have of this one. I mean, we see the kind of film companies do it all the time. They always introduce like a human bad guy to try and pad out the running time, because they don't want to spend lots of VFX doing the more costly you know, creature effects and things like that. There's a bit of underwater photography, but I have to say it's not the best. I've seen plenty of instances with low budget films where the underwater photography is better than this one, unfortunately. There's a variety of other kind of technical issues with this movie. There's some couple of instances where you'll see the boom mic, you'll see some ropey kind of editing, some horrible transitions. Again, another thing that looks like it should be a trailer film is having these like comic book panels and things and transitions and stuff like that. It's very much makes it feel quite dated. And obviously it is a 2003 movie. And the plot is just silly. It's just a very silly plot. It's a schlocky movie. It's not trying to be anything too serious, if you like, but yeah, it's just a pretty throwaway plot that doesn't really feel like it's had much thought behind it. And to be honest with you, it does copy Humanoids from the deep, and we even have an instance where probably in the most shocking scene in the movie, where a woman kind of gives birth to a Aquanoid, but it's weird. It's a little weird, and yeah, the movie's a little weird. So it's a very kind of low budget, silly movie that's kind of slapped together with little, I think, finesse or really kind of making you all that interesting, and to be honest. But if you like very kind of ropey schlock, you might want to check it out. I'll give it a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.